Ambassador Tai, good to see you. Thank you for your work in addressing the large civil aircraft dispute. New Jersey's food and wine importers certainly appreciate the 4-month pause in the tariffs, but since we are now about halfway through that suspension, I want to get a better understanding of the status and the path forward. How are negotiations with the EU and UK progressing on this issue?
They are progressing, I feel...
The question is, how are they progressing?
I understand. I'm encouraged. I have made clear that we are interested in resolving these disputes in this 4-month period, and I would very much like for us to make the kind of progress between now and July that will bring us to that resolution.
So would you expect that you'll get July, let's see, it's, so in the next 2 months or so?
That's right, we're halfway through the 4-month period.
If not, do you expect the tariffs to go back into place, or will the pause be extended until an agreement can be reached?
What I have told my counterparts is that we are very serious about this 4-month deadline. So let me put that there. We would like to have these. We really need to have these disputes resolved.
Well, I really hope you get an agreement too, but if you don't, I urge you to look at avoid hitting restaurants and food and wine importers again with tariffs. They weren't particularly successful in bringing a resolution to the dispute. I know you need leverage, but I just call that to attention. Hopefully you can be successful. As you know, I have a longstanding concern with the current lack of oversight over U.S. trade policy precedes this administration. And the announcement last week that the United States would back a TRIPS waiver negotiation highlights to me how important better oversight is to ensuring that we have transparent trade policy with appropriate congressional consultation. During your confirmation hearing, you said you would commit to, quote, close negotiations with the Senate Finance Committee on trade negotiations, and would work closely with the committee to identify ways to, quote, improve the flow of information and the development of trade policy. Yet, at least from my perspective, we were not closely consulted on this announcement, which is a good example of why we think it's critical that we establish an Inspector General for USTR to provide independent oversight, transparency, and accountability, and ultimately help USTR develop better trade policy. I appreciate the chairman at this point has that in the bill, and I strongly support it, and we're working with the administration on refining it to make sure that it ultimately can be agreeable. Can you commit to briefing the committee on the status of the negotiations, both before and after each negotiating session?
Senator Menendez, the negotiations just in general, or are you talking about TRIPS specifically?
TRIPS specifically.
Sure, yes.
Yes. Okay. Now, let me ask you, it's clear that if the United States is going to successfully diversify away from China, that we need to deepen our trading relationships with our neighbors in the Western Hemisphere. Last week, you said you wanted to re-examine the CAFTA-DR agreement and find out why it hasn't stimulated economic development in the region, and to the extent that many people expected. I certainly, appreciate you taking a look at it. What are your initial thoughts on why the agreement hasn't panned out the way we would have hoped for, and what's your timeline for your review?
Senator Menendez, my initial thoughts are that, there's often a disconnect between all of the energy that we have in getting an agreement across the finish line and then giving the agreement the care and attention that it requires over maintenance over the years. In terms of a timeline, I don't have a particular timeline. I would be very interested in the views of this committee, certainly Congress. I know that there's a certain member of this committee who probably knows more about this agreement than I ever will, and that would be Senator Portman, who was the U.S. Trade Representative, who got the CAFTA-DR over the finish line. And I think that we all want our trade agreements to succeed. Let's give all of them, not just the USMCA, let's give all of them the care and attention that they require.
Well, I appreciate that. I would just simply say, obviously, when we are facing the challenges with Central America that we are facing right now in terms of those who are fleeing the country, it's critically important to look at every leverage of government in order to meet the challenge. Economic development is a critical part of that. If D.R. CAFTA is failing for some reason, then we should know what its shortcomings are at the end of the day. And I'll submit a question to you about whether you're working on a new softwood lumber agreement with Canada. I keep hearing from housing people that it's incredibly challenging.